Had you ever had one of those days where nothing seems to go right? One of those days where no matter what you say or do, it's wrong. You know, your coffee from 7-Eleven is cold before you drink it. You can't fit your key in the lock at the office door. You forget to talk to your organist about the first hymn. He faithfully goes ahead as if you were going to rehearse it, even though you haven't said you will. In fact, you said you wouldn't, but he couldn't hear you because your microphone wasn't working properly. You know, one of those sorts of days. Boy, you say to yourself, this day is really the pits. I got to thinking about that phrase this week and decided to do a little research. How and why do we speak of a really bad set of circumstances as being the pits? Contrary to what I read somewhere, it has nothing to do with the city of Pittsburgh. As it turns out, the word pit is far older than the home of the Steelers, Penguins, and Pirates. In fact, it comes from an Old English word, pit, P-Y-T-T, which means a water hole, which in turn probably derives from the Latin putius, meaning a well. In essence, a pit is a hole in the ground. However, according to the online source called Word Detective, and like all online sources, I never make these up, the phrase the pits, when it refers to an unpleasant experience, actually has another derivation. For pits, as you know, if you remember junior high at all, is slang for armpits. In particular, smelly armpits. So we might say a situation really stinks. It's the pits. Another source suggests that the term the pits first came into popular usage in the 50s. Of course, they all rolled up their sleeves with cigarettes in them. But whether the pits points to a hole in the ground or smelly body parts, the word pit actually has yet another meaning. Because pits can also refer to those seeds hidden in the interior of a cherry, a peach, or a plum. A pit can be stinky. It can be a deep hole we can't seem to crawl out of. It can be unpleasant experiences, or it can be a seed. Now, I'm not a farmer or a gardener for that matter, as I have admitted publicly before. My good wife won't even let me have plants in my office for fear I'll forget to water them, which I will, and well, we all know what happens to those kind of situations. But despite my limited horticultural experience, I do know a thing or two about seeds. To start with, more often than not, they don't look anything like the fruit or flower or plant that they become when they germinate and grow. To look at an apple, you'd never guess that it emanated from a tiny, hard, little round thing. To see an avocado pit, you'd never guess it would become a fruit with luscious, luscious possibilities. But without seeds, there would be no apple cider. Without pits, I'm sorry, there would be no guacamole. Ay, caramba. I also know that seeds and pits need to be buried in the ground before they can become trees or bushes or plants. And after they are buried in the soil, they somehow, without any real effort on my part except for occasional watering, transform into a wondrous new thing. Of course, even a kindergartner knows that, as Robert Fulghum famously pointed out in his essay, "All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup, he writes. The roots go down and the plant comes up, and nobody really knows how or why, and we really like it. Nobody knows if Jesus ever did any farming. He is said to have been a carpenter, but that doesn't rule out the possibility that he wasn't shanghaied once in a while to help till the fields or hoe his mother's kitchen garden. Whatever the case, he lived in an agricultural society and probably knew a lot more about pits and seeds and plants than most of us gathered here this morning. And he constantly used agricultural metaphors to fuel his parables. Our lesson from Mark provides two examples of that. The famous parable about the mustard seed and its reminder that big things can grow out of the smallest beginnings. And the first of the two parables we heard read earlier, which is lesser known but no less important. Like many of his parables, he uses this one to help his listeners understand what he means by the term, the kingdom of God. Now, note this. He's not talking about a place. The kingdom of God is not some country or some nation that you can find on a map. No, the term kingdom of God might be better translated the reign of God or the rule of God. As one scholar writes, the kingdom of God is all about people realizing divine justice and peace in all that they do. The kingdom of God is all about realizing divine justice and peace in all that you say and do. This then, says Jesus, this is what the kingdom of God is like. This is how it works. A farmer goes out to plant his crops. He sows the seed, and then, while he's asleep, it sprouts and grows, and he doesn't have the faintest idea how it happens, but it does. Nobody really knows why or how, but it does. When we take the risk of planting the seeds, they have the opportunity to sprout. They may be out of sight. We may not realize how it happens, but they sprout and they grow. It's as if Jesus is saying, look, first century listeners, look around you. Life may seem bleak at times. Those Romans, they are really ruling us with an iron fist. Crucifixions are happening left and right on every hillside, it seems. The poor just seem to get poorer. There is a real lack of justice. But don't give up. Keep planting those seeds. Keep putting the pits in the ground. Justice will sprout. Peace will blossom. the kingdom of God will be realized in its fullness. As William Barclay reminds us, this parable tells us that, like seeds buried in the soil, the growth of the reign of peace and justice is imperceptible, constant, and inevitable. But think about those times when your life is bleak, when things don't go your way, when you make mistakes, when you fail. Now, you can spend time, if you like, feeling sorry for yourself. A little self-pity now and then is kind of fun. You can go around wringing your hands, bemoaning your own ineptitude. Or you can take a close look at those failures, and to use a phrase, you can learn from your mistakes. God willing, there will never, ever be another hymn insert that I don't talk to Norman about. You may be in the pits, but you can see failure as a pit, as a seed leading to growth and change. Professor Drew Letter writes, "Plant the seed of failure in the soil of your soul. If need be, water it with tears, but also douse it with the sunshine of hope and faith that one day, perhaps soon, perhaps later, that seed will sprout forth a plant laden with fruit." Plant the seed of failure in the soil of your soul. Judith Taus Roberts tells of a time when everything seemed to be going wrong in her household. Things were tight, her financial resources were stretched. She got home one night only to discover a second notice from the gas company with its accompanying threat. Her 11-year-old son was in a tizzy because of a bad haircut. He'd tried to cover it up with a baseball cap, poor kid, but his teacher had insisted that he remove it in class, and all the other kids made fun of him. "Hey, Baldy!" Her second-grade daughter had lost a spelling bee that very day on the word, ironically, afraid. Her first grader had been teased by her classmates when she had great difficulty reading aloud. It was the pits. All in all, it had not been a good day. But Judith refused to be held down. She told the children they all needed to declare a red letter failure day and celebrate. So they were going to go to McDonald's for a failure party. When they wondered at her approach, has Mom really lost it here, she told them, "My Grandma Taus always used to say we learn more from our failures than from our successes." And with that, they headed off for cheeseburgers and fries and stopped their hearts in the future for what would be the first of many failure parties. "I hope," writes Taus Roberts, "I hope I've planted seeds in my children's souls gathered from the wisdom of women before me, seeds to be scattered in their own gardens someday." When Thomas Edison was a child, he was told by his teachers that he was too stupid to learn anything. But he planted his academic failures, and in time they grew into over 1,000 patents. What have you done today? The light bulb alone was the product of 100 failed attempts. Sir Isaac Newton was needed at home to run the family farm, so his mother pulled him out of school to literally plant seeds. But he was a failure as a farmer, a royal failure. Yet he planted his mistakes, went on to study at Cambridge, and in time changed the very way we view the universe. Sidney Poitier tried to break into show business by auditioning for the American Negro Theater, and he bombed. His Caribbean accent was so thick no one could understand him. He forgot his lines. It was a disaster. But he planted that failure and kept at it, and in time helped pave the way for other persons of color as his failures blossomed into an Oscar for Best Actor, ironically, for his performance in Lilies of the Fields. So how do you deal with failure? How do you cope with things when they don't go as planned? What seeds have been planted in your soul? When we faithfully plant the seeds of failure, they will grow. We will not always understand how. The growth may indeed be imperceptible. It will take time. But the growth is inevitable. The seed gets planted, and then while you are sleeping, the roots go down and the plant goes up. And we don't know how or why, but we like it. And that, my friends, is like the kingdom of God. Amen. Sisters and brothers, I find this parable so enormously comforting because my life is full of mistakes. My life is full of failures. And if I'm only willing to face those and then plant them in the soil of my soul, I can trust that God will take them and nurture them and transform them into something of great beauty and grace. It's risky to plant anything, but it is only when we are willing to plant that we are able to harvest. Might you this week plant the seeds of failure that cross your path in your soul, and pray that God uses those mistakes to make you a better person, one more able to move through life, working for peace and justice and grace as part of the kingdom of God. Go in peace.